Hi friends, I'm Chelsea and I am here to talk about my top 25 audiobooks. So as you can tell from the title, I've read quite a few audiobooks in my life as a reader, and I thought it would be fun to narrow it down and let you know what my top favorites have been. It was pretty difficult to narrow it down to 25 because I have listened to a lot of really good audiobooks, but I feel pretty strongly about these choices. A lot of these are books that I think I would not have enjoyed as much if I had just read it physically. Books that I think are really well done on audio and that sometimes are even meant to be read via audio. If you're just looking for some audiobook recommendations, some of these might be more popular and then some might be a little less popular. So I'm going to do these by genre categories. So I have like some historical fiction, some just general literary fiction, some fantasy, and then like mystery, thriller, horror, one horror. And then I have some memoirs too. And I'm going to start with historical fiction. My first one is actually two books by the same author, and these are pretty popular books, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is probably everyone's favorite audiobook recommendation. This is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A lot of people, when you ask what your favorite audiobook is, will say this one, and for good reason, because it is written in interview format. It's about a fictional band in the 60s and 70s, but they really feel like a real band. I have the book, but I haven't read it physically. I feel like it's just meant to be listened to, and it's a full cast narration. It feels like you're listening to a Rolling Stone interview and just learning about a real band. And there's a TV show, which I really enjoyed too, so highly recommend that. And then same author, different book. This is another really popular one, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a dual narration, I think. It's historical, but it goes from the past and back and forth to the present. Basically, Evelyn Hugo is like a Hollywood movie icon, and she wants to tell her life story, so she has someone interview her in the present day, but then it goes back from, I think, the 50s to the 80s to present day, basically talking about all the husbands she's had along the way and her life as a Hollywood actress and all that. So yeah, this was a really good audiobook. There's a lot of news articles, just like multimedia stuff in it. I had a good time listening to this book. Next up, we have The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I listened to this one with my family on a vacation a couple years ago, and we really enjoyed it. So this is set during World War II, during Holocaust and Nazi Germany. This one is unique because the narrator in the book is deaf, and it's really well done. It's a single narration. Basically, it's about a young girl named Liesel. She sees a book in the snow one day, and she picks it up. It says this is her first act of book thievery, and then she starts to steal book from Nazi book burnings, and then also her family ends up hiding a Jew in the basement. So it's going through all the typical World War II stuff, but with the unique perspective of death being the narrator. It was just a really good narration. There were some really funny, entertaining moments, some German cuss words that we picked up, which was quite funny. It was just a really emotional, poignant read, and highly recommend listening to it. Okay, next up is another pretty popular one, an author I really love, and that is The Great Alone by Kristin. Love this cover. This one is set in Alaska in 1974, and it's about this family. They moved to Alaska. It's a husband, a wife, and their teenage daughter. The husband is pretty abusive, and the wife doesn't want to leave even though she should, and their daughter Lenny is kind of just caught in the middle of it all, but they're like literally in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, so it's not a good situation. This is a very heavy one with lots of dark topics, but very good emotional read, as Kristin tends to do. Really good audiobook. It's narrated by Julia Whalen, who is one of my favorite audiobook narrators. This is one that I feel like you would get a lot out of it whether you listened to it or read it, but I happened to listen and really enjoyed the audiobook experience. Okay, next, this is probably my top audiobook I've listened to, so this might be the number one that I would recommend, and it's not a book that a lot of people have talked about. I've seen it more lately, but I love this book. I want to reread it. So this is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a young adult historical fiction. It's also set during World War II. I think it's actually World War I and II, and it follows two main couples. There's a lot of musical themes, and there's a unique take on this one in that it is kind of narrated from the perspective of various Greek gods. I guess it's told by Aphrodite specifically, but there's a lot of discourse between different gods like Apollo and Ares. What I love about this audiobook, not only is it a full cast narration, narration, but it also has music in it. There's a specific Beethoven sonata continually played throughout. It's kind of like one of the characters' themes. He's a musician. It's just a beautiful listening experience for me as a musician. I really connected to that, and I think this book absolutely needs to be listened to as an audiobook. So please check this one out. It's so good. And then the last one in this historical fiction category, I don't have physically. I would love to own it, but I do not have the physical copy, and that is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, I think is how you pronounce it. So it's set in 1953 Tehran, and it follows two teenagers, Roya and Bahman, and they get together, they have a little romance, things progress pretty quickly, they're about to get married, and then there's some political upheaval and then violence that starts in their town, and Bahman doesn't show up. Like, they're supposed to meet in the town square or something. They get separated, and over time she just decides to move away to America, and a lot of time passes before they even interact at all. It kind of feels like The Notebook a little bit, which I really like The Notebook. Not a huge Nicholas Sparks reader these days, but it feels like a historical fiction Tehran version of The Notebook. I really love this one. The narrator was really good. It was just a single narration. Those are my historical fiction recommendations. So the next category I will talk about is mystery, thriller, and horror. And I only have one physical book in this category, so I guess I'll talk about that first. This is actually the one horror. I've talked about this before recently. This is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady, Hendrix. I don't read a lot of horror, but this one was really good. I think this is a good introduction to horror if you don't read the genre a lot, and this audiobook was really fun. It's set in Charleston, and it's this group of women who are basically housewives, and they have this like murder mystery true crime book club. They're all very classic white Southern ladies in the 50s. No, not the 50s, the 90s. Close enough. The narrator for this one is Bonnie Turpin, and she's really good. I've listened to a couple books that she narrates. She does really funny Southern accents for all of them. It just feels very relatable if you have been around Southern people at all, which I have, living in North Carolina. It's just a really fun book. And then this guy shows up in their town that they start kind of obsessing over, but then he's a little creepy and weird, and maybe a vampire, maybe not. This one was just a really good listen, and I recommend checking it out. The others, I will just have the images up on the screen. So the next one I'll talk about is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I listened to this one pretty recently. This is about a girl named Lucy who is accused of murdering her best friend in her small town. Everyone thinks that it's her who did it, and then at the same time there's a true crime podcast, and the host of the podcast wants to interview her and all the people in her town to figure out what happened. With there being the true crime podcast element, I think that works really well as an audiobook. There's like a theme song that plays every time the podcast chapters come up, and again, kind of like an interview format. So really good to listen to. Definitely recommend that audiobook. The next one is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevensen. This is a single narration. This one is kind of like your classic murder mystery, think like Agatha Christie kind of feel, but breaking the fourth wall. There's a lot of really like meta moments that kind of reflect on mysteries as a genre. The narrator just really brings out the humor of that. I felt like that was a really unique reading or listening experience. So basically it's about this family and what it sounds like. Everyone has killed someone, and they're at this ski resort, and I think a murder takes place, and so you're just trying to figure out what happened, but there's a lot of potential suspects because everyone in his family has killed someone. There's a second book out, at least. There might be more coming out later, so it's kind of like a series, I guess. And then next, this is another book I listened to fairly recently. This is The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, and this is a multicast narration with more mixed media, I think like news articles, letters, emails. Oh, there's my cats. Cool. I think I'd mentioned this before. Parts of it felt like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because the main, or one of the main characters, Ruby, we're learning about her life and like some mysterious things that we're uncovering, and she very much feels like an Evelyn Hugo type figure. So that kind of has like a historical fiction feel, but then in the present day you have her son and his wife, and then their whole toxic family drama surrounded around their family house in North Carolina. So there's a lot of mystery around what happened with Ruby. Really entertaining, really great audiobook narrators. Great time. The last two in this category are by the same author. The first one I'll talk about is Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto. So this is kind of like a cozy mystery mystery with kind of a romance feel. Just a really funny, lighthearted, kind of ridiculous at times, but I really enjoyed it. I'm just going to read the first part. What happens when you mix one accidental murder with 2,000 wedding guests and then toss in a possible curse on 3 generations of an immigrant Chinese-Indonesian family? You get 4 meddling Asian aunties coming to the rescue. It's pretty ridiculous in the best way. The aunties are just the best, and the audiobook narrator just really brought out their humor. It was a fun time, very quick, easy read. Again, one that I think I would not have enjoyed as much if I had just read it. So definitely recommend listening to that. And then the other one by this author is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. A mouthful there. This is kind of another cozy mystery feel, but it follows Vera Wong, who is a 60-year-old tea expert. She has a tea shop, and one day she finds a dead body in her tea shop. She starts to look into it. She thinks she's going to do a better job than the police to solve this crime, and she recruits some people to help her out. She knows what she's doing. You want her to be the person coming to raise your children or telling people how to do things. She's got it all together. There's some really good heartwarming moments in this. Entertaining audiobook, great humor in this one as well. So I definitely recommend both of these cozy mystery kind of books. And next I'll talk about just literary general fiction with a classic thrown in there. So this next one is also one of my top audiobooks, and I just reread it. So it's very fresh, and I have a library copy. I really want to own it. And this is a bit of a spoiler, I guess, for my August wrap up, but that's okay because I really need to include it. So this is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, a debut novel, and this has 2 audiobook narrators. One of them is Marjan Ireland, who is another one of my favorites. So if you see that Marjan Ireland is narrating a book, you should probably listen to it because she's really good. Same as Julia Whalen and Bonnie Turpin. Those are probably some of my top ones. This one is very cozy, wholesome, and it follows 3 main characters: Tova, who is an older lady who works the night shift at an aquarium, and then Cameron, who's in his 30s. He's just kind of a hot mess trying to figure out his life. And then my favorite, Marcellus the octopus. He has his own POV and he's hilarious. He's probably one of my favorite fictional characters ever, which says a lot. I just absolutely love this book, love the audiobook, really fun to listen to, really heartwarming, really emotional at times, and Marcellus's chapters are the best. I was laughing out loud multiple times. So if you check this book out, please listen to it on audio. And then I'm going to continue on the Marjan Ireland train. So this is another book narrated by her, and this is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This is the first Frederick Bachman book I read, and I really loved it. I kind of want to reread this one too. When you hear the synopsis, it sounds like, okay, I don't know if I would like this, but it's really good. Please read it or listen to it. So basically it's about a real estate open house, and all these people show up to check it out, but then there is a hostage situation. A failed bank robber shows up, and they're all just stuck in this apartment with the failed bank robber holding them hostage, and they all start to kind of talk about their lives, open up, learn things about each other's lives. That's the easiest way to summarize it. But in typical Bachman fashion, it's funny and heartwarming, kind of heavy hitting at times, just all around a feel-good book with some mental health themes. Again, a really good narration that really brings all these different characters to life. So the next one is Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I almost said by Meryl Streep because she's the one who narrates it. When I heard that Meryl Streep was narrating this book, I was like, okay, I'm interested. I don't really know much about the book or the author. I loved Meryl Streep's narration. I think she should narrate a lot more books. So if that's not enough for you, then I don't know what to say. This is basically about a mother and 3 daughters who are on their cherry farm in Michigan, I think, and it's during the pandemic, but they don't really talk about COVID much. So if you don't like that, it's not a huge element of the book. And the mom is just telling the girls about her life. She was an actress and she had some pretty interesting situations, relationships, all that. So she's just kind of telling them about her life. And it's just a very cozy, again, heartwarming kind of story. I just loved Meryl Streep's narration. Okay, next I have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This is another one narrated by Bonnie Turpin, and this could be classified as YA contemporary social justice fiction. I guess I've seen that before. And this one is about, I can't remember the main character's name. I read it this year, but it's about a Black girl who is kind of torn between 2 worlds, her neighborhood and her family, but then she goes to a very white rich kind of prep school. And then tragically one day her best friend is shot by a police officer. She is just kind of caught up then in this whole situation and trying to figure out who she is, what her identity is. So it's definitely a heavy one, but there's also some really funny moments with her and her family. The narrator was just really good, really brought all the emotions and heavy themes out, and also just really brought the humor to the situation. And yeah, I just love her voice. There's like certain people's voices that are just relaxing to listen to, you know? So I really recommend this one, especially as an audiobook. Then the last one is a classic, actually. So this is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery, and specifically I listened to the Audible version, which is narrated by Rachel McAdams. So if you don't have Audible, sorry, it's free on Audible if you do have an Audible account. So there's that. But I really liked her narration of it. I feel like she really brought Anne's character to life. Her precocious and free-spirited, stubborn and fiery at times, just her really strong and independent, hilarious personality. So I thought she did a really good job bringing her to life, but also the other characters. I'm not going to explain Anne of Green Gables. Most of you probably know, but it's a middle grade classic pretty much, and it's a really good one. I'm glad I finally listened to it this year. Next is my fantasy category. This would not be a Libraries and Lattes video without mentioning Brandon Sanderson. You're probably sick of hearing about this, but it's fine. So this is the third book that I'm currently reading, but I'm just talking about the Stormlight Archive in general, so kind of cheating, I guess, because there's like 4 books in it so far. But I've been listening and reading these books, but a lot more listening, because these books are not very easy to sit down and read. I just don't love reading in this kind of paperback, but the audiobooks are really good. There's a male narrator and a female narrator. I will say the female narrator, she's not like my top favorite, but she's pretty good. The male narrator is really good. Michael Kramer and Kate Redding are the narrators. And so this is epic fantasy. It's so hard to describe the plot of this, but basically it follows 3 main characters. At the beginning of the book, they're all kind of in their separate parts in this world called Roshar that is dictated by the storms that are really intense, and also the storms power their magic. It's called Stormlight. A lot of these characters start to discover their powers over time. They're also trying to fight off evil forces as usual in a fantasy book. So that's a very broad plot summary. These audiobook narrations are really good. Definitely recommend listening to this series. And then the next one is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, the inspiration for my channel name, which it's not like my top favorite book, but I just love the coziness of it. This book is actually narrated by the author, which I always enjoy when they do a good job. This is kind of like the beginning of the trend of reading cozy fantasy. I feel like these books have really become popular and started the trend for a lot of other books. So it's basically about an orc who retires from her life of battle and violence and whatnot, and she goes to open a coffee shop. Pretty much it. A lot of slice of life coziness, little romance in there. It's just a good time. The second book is good too, Bookshops and Bone Dust, and I really enjoyed the author's narration. Next up is another series. I'm just gonna show you my favorite book in the series. I only listened to a couple of them, but the ones I listened to were really good. So I can probably say the whole series, and that is none other than the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas. This is book 2, Court of Mist and Fury. I listened to this one and the third book and the fifth book, and they were all really good. I really liked the narration. I think a lot of them had different narrators actually, but I enjoyed all of them. I feel like listening to a fantasy book is just really fun because it really brings it to life more. I am kind of curious to check out the graphic audio. I know they have that for this series, and some people have mentioned that that's an even more like immersive experience, so I'd be interested to try that out. I just listened to the normal audio book, whatever. Classic romantasy. I'm actually trying to find another series or book that gives me the same feeling that I got when I read this book and this series. So if you want to drop any suggestions for what to fill the ACOTAR hole, please let me know. Next up is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This was just one narrator. It's kind of like Scottish Celtic folklore, and the narrator has a very beautiful Scottish accent, which just really set the tone for the book and made it a really pleasant listening experience. This one is very whimsical, enchanting, very cozy, lyrical, has a lot of musical themes, and basically it's about a character who is a bard, and he returns to his island after being running away when he hears that some girls have gone missing. Only he can help because his music like summons this river spirits. I think this island is very much ruled by different types of spirits of like fire, water, earth, and wind, basically the elements. And there's a little romance in this, which I really liked. Love listening to a Scottish accent or just a British accent. Any other accent in general is really fun for me. So definitely recommend that. And then this one I actually just finished and it's very fresh in my mind, but I think I would not have enjoyed this book as much if I hadn't listened. So that's why it's going in. And that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is one narrator and I think he has a British accent. So that kind of goes along with the theme of other accents. This is a Greek mythology retelling basically of the Iliad, I think. I don't know anything about Greek mythology. Mostly focuses on like the Trojan War, I believe. Achilles was part of that. The first part of the book feels very cozy, focusing on Achilles and Patroclus's relationship. And then it kind of goes into more battle stuff. Definitely enjoyed the audiobook. I feel like it just pulled me in and it was very entrancing. Is that a word? It kind of just like lured me in and was really beautiful. Really enjoyed the audiobook for this. So definitely recommend picking that up. I have 3 more books and they are memoirs actually. I've only listened to memoirs on audiobook and they've all been narrated by the author, which I definitely recommend doing. I think that just really brings their story out more. There's usually times where they get a little emotional and you just really feel like you're getting the full experience by listening to them tell their stories. So the first one that I have to talk about is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. She narrates it. This one's been pretty popular lately, but she was on iCarly and basically was like a child actor, and it just talks about her experience with that and her very toxic mother who kind of just pushed her into all these things, and a lot of bad experiences too with like certain people on like the television crews and people that she encountered while she was working. It's really sad. There's a lot of really heavy moments, but also some really like humorous things. She does a good job of communicating all these heavy things that happen in kind of a light, humorous way, which feels kind of weird, but it's really fascinating and sad at the same time. Okay, this next one is another kind of really heavy one, probably the heaviest audiobook I've listened to, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. It's so impactful. It's been a long time since I've listened to this one, but I still remember feeling just like the impact of it and the heaviness of it, but the bits of hope that she had. So basically, if you don't know about this one, this is about Chanel Miller. Obviously, there was a case a while back, like a sexual assault case. Brock Turner was the man who assaulted her, and she was at a college party, I guess, or just a party. Basically, they found her in a ditch and she had been assaulted and had no memory of what happened. She blacked out. And so it goes basically into the case and just her story. But for a while, her name was not attached to the case. But in this book, she really just goes all in, tells you everything, does not hold back. Very heavy, but so well done. She's so eloquent in expressing her feelings and her experience. Just a lot of really good thoughts and things to think about when it comes to this topic. And then last but not least is Finding Me by Viola Davis, another really good, impactful memoir. She talks about her life, how she grew up in extreme poverty, and then how she got into acting, just her experience pretty much of her life. Just really inspiring to see kind of where she's come from and where she is now. Lots of different relationships that were good or bad that kind of catapulted her into her next phase of life. I just really enjoyed listening to her tell her story. She put a lot of emotion into it. Another really eloquent narrator. She's just a really amazing person. I really admire her a lot. Definitely recommend this book. That is a lot of audiobooks that I really love. I would recommend to anyone pretty much. I will keep adding to this list, I'm sure, over time. I would love to hear what some of your favorite audiobooks are, if there's any different ones that I didn't mention here, or if you have a favorite out of these that I mentioned. Just let me know. I love to get more audiobook recommendations and to hear what y'all's favorites are as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!